Johnson, what the hell are those boots? The words cut through the barracks like a rifle shot. Laughter followed, bouncing off the steel bunks and concrete walls. Private Marcus Johnson froze, standing at attention, staring dead ahead, while every eye in the room drilled into him. His boots, scuffed, cracked, handed down from a cousin, stood out like a black mark in the neat line of polished leather at the foot of each rack. You planning to show up to war dressed like a farm boy? Another recruit sneered. A few chuckled, shaking their heads. The room was heavy with that cruel silence that only breaks when somebody decides it's safe to pile on. And in that silence, Marcus swallowed hard and locked his jaw. He didn't move, didn't answer, didn't give them the satisfaction. The barracks smelled like sweat, damp canvas, and shoe polish. Recruits sat on bunks, some cleaning rifles, others writing letters, a few smirking as they watched the scene unfold. Marcus stood there 20 feet from his rack, feeling the weight of every stare. He wanted to explain, say the pay he had went straight to his little sister back home, that he couldn't afford new boots yet, but in the army, excuses were poison. Better to stay silent, take it, and keep breathing. That's when Sergeant Miller stormed in, boots pounding on the tile, campaign hat low over his brow. The room snapped to attention in a heartbeat. At ease, he barked, scanning the line of recruits like a hawk hunting mice, his eyes locked on Marcus's boots. For a moment, the sergeant's lips curled into a grin, the kind that never meant anything good. Private Johnson, Miller barked, did the Army issue you busted leather, or did you drag those out of a dumpster? Yes, Sergeant. Marcus's voice came steady, low. Yes, Sergeant? Miller stepped closer, his face inches away. Boy, do you even belong here? You think this is Sunday school? You think discipline is optional? A few recruits tried to smother laughs. Miller didn't stop them. He fed off it. I don't know what kind of dirt farm you crawled out of, but here we don't cut corners. Here weakness gets men killed. He jabbed a finger at Marcus's chest. You understand that, Private? Yes, Sergeant. Marcus didn't flinch, didn't blink. His heart pounded so loud he thought everyone could hear it, but his eyes stayed fixed forward. Off to the side, standing by the far bunk, was Lieutenant Ramirez. She was young, calm, a quiet presence during inspections. She said nothing, didn't step in, but Marcus caught the faintest flicker in her expression. She'd noticed. Not the boots. Him. The way he took the ridicule without breaking. The way he stood there like a post while others crumbled under less. She said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. Drop and give me 50, Miller barked. Marcus hit the floor, palms flat on cold tile. Push-up after push-up, sweat dripping, arms burning, boots scraping as the others shifted, some grinning, some whispering. Every rep echoed humiliation, but each one also carried something else. Discipline, resilience, a promise he'd made long ago. By the time he reached 50, his arms shook like wires, but he kept his back straight. On your feet, Miller roared. Marcus rose, chest heaving, sweat streaking his brow. Still silent, still unbroken. The sergeant leaned in, voice low. You're not gonna last, Johnson. Men like you never do. Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. Regulation said silence, but inside his father's voice, his father who wore the uniform before him, echoed strong. Stand tall. Endure. Prove them wrong. That night when the lights went out and the barracks filled with snores and whispers, Marcus lay awake on his rack. His boots sat by the bed, ugly and cracked, but his. He reached under his pillow and pulled out a worn photograph of his father in uniform, stern but proud, one arm around a younger Marcus. I won't fail you, Dad, he whispered. His throat tightened, but he pressed the photo back under the pillow and closed his eyes. Across the room, Ramirez lingered near the doorway, watching the recruits settle. Her gaze flicked once more toward Marcus. He hadn't cracked. Not yet. And something in her gut told her he wouldn't. Everyone else thought the story was over, that Marcus Johnson would fade out before the next inspection. But they didn't know what was coming. They didn't know the fire inside him was just beginning to burn. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. Rain came down in sheets that morning, the kind that cut through your uniform and soaked you to the bone. The platoon was halfway through drills, running endless laps across the muddy field while Sergeant Miller barked from under his poncho, dry as a bone. "Move it, ladies! I've seen grandmas with hip replacements run faster than you sorry excuses." His voice carried like thunder, but his eyes kept finding Marcus Johnson. Always Johnson. Every mistake in the unit, every stumble, every crooked line, somehow pointed back to him. And when a recruit slipped in the mud, Miller didn't hesitate. "Johnson, that's on you. Another 10 laps, alone." The platoon groaned, but no one spoke up. Marcus dropped his gaze, turned, and started running through the downpour. Alone. Mud splashing with every step, lungs burning. Not a word of complaint. From the sidelines, Lieutenant Ramirez stood with her arms crossed, rain dripping off her cover, saying nothing. But Marcus felt her eyes on him. Not pity, not amusement, just watching, like she was measuring something no one else could see. By the time the unit filed into the chow hall, Marcus was still drenched. Mud streaked up his fatigues. He grabbed his tray in silence. The room was loud, filled with clattering trays and voices that echoed off steel beams. Soldiers laughed, bragged about their times, complained about sore legs. Marcus sat at the edge, his tray half empty. He picked smaller portions on purpose, stretching every meal, saving what little cash he had. His sister's rent back home meant more than seconds at the line. "Careful, Johnson," one recruit called across the table, smirking. "Don't eat too much. Boots might finally fall apart under the weight." Laughter broke out. Marcus lowered his head, poked at his food. "Hey, maybe he's saving it for his cow back home," another chimed in. "What do you feed him down there, Johnson? Corn? Scraps?" The group howled, their voices carrying, but Marcus stayed silent, chewing slowly, tasting more bitterness than food. He'd learned early, words wasted were words used against you. But not everyone laughed. Corporal Davis, sitting 2 seats down, slid half a bread roll across the table without looking up. No words, just a quiet gesture. Marcus caught it, tucked it against his tray. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. In silence, a bond formed stronger than any joke. That night, when the others collapsed into their racks, Marcus stayed awake under the dim glow of the exit light. A field manual propped against his knees. He traced every line like it was scripture, memorizing tactics, learning the codes. While others snored, he whispered terms to himself, testing his memory, willing himself to be sharper. Sleep was a luxury, success wasn't, and still, no matter what he did, the whispers followed him. During inspections, when his uniform wasn't starched enough, Miller pounced. "Pathetic. You'll never survive deployment." During weapons drills, when his grouping wasn't perfect, recruits snickered. "Stick to farm work, Johnson." And every insult sank deep, leaving bruises you couldn't see. But each bruise hardened him, layering strength over weakness, steel over doubt. The pressure built, day after day, until the storm finally broke. It happened during an obstacle course. Late afternoon, sky gray. The field still slick from rain. The platoon was lined up, each man pushing through walls, crawling under barbed wire, sprinting to the finish. Marcus was near the back, focused, steady. Then one recruit, Parker, one of his loudest tormentors, misstepped on the rope climb. His hands slipped, body swinging, feet scraping, until he dangled helpless, panic in his voice. I can't hold it." His boots kicked at empty air. The squad froze. No one moved. Miller didn't shout orders. He watched, waiting, maybe wanting to see what would happen. Seconds stretched long. Without thinking, Marcus sprinted forward. "Move!" he shouted, charging past 2 stunned recruits. He grabbed the rope, wrapped it around his forearm, and climbed with everything he had left. His muscles screamed, but he reached Parker, locked an arm around his harness, and braced with his legs. "I got you!" Marcus yelled. Parker's weight dragged him down, but he held, veins burning. Inch by inch, he lowered them both, mud soaking their uniforms as they hit the ground. Parker collapsed, gasping, staring at Marcus with wide eyes. Shock, gratitude, fear. The silence around them was deafening. Miller finally stepped forward, his face unreadable. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. Marcus straightened, chest heaving. "He was gonna fall, Sergeant." His voice cracked with exhaustion, but it held steady. Miller's eyes narrowed, studying him. For once, there was no insult ready on his tongue. The recruits whispered. The same voices that mocked Marcus hours ago now stared at him like they'd never seen him before. Parker, still on the ground, whispered hoarsely, You saved me." Marcus nodded once, then stepped back into line. No smile, no words, just discipline, just duty. Lieutenant Ramirez's gaze cut through the silence. Her chin lifted slightly, the smallest nod, but it spoke louder than any cheer. She'd seen everything. She knew what it meant, and in that moment the balance shifted. Not fully, not yet, but enough to leave everyone unsettled. That night the barracks were quieter. No jokes, no whispers, just the sound of boots clunking against lockers, the rustle of sheets. Marcus lay in his rack, staring at the ceiling, arms still aching. He thought of his sister, of the rent due, of his father's photo under his pillow. For the first time he let himself exhale. Just once. He had given everything he had in that moment, and for the first time, they couldn't laugh it away. The Army hadn't broken him, not yet. And though no medals were pinned, no speeches made, something had changed. A seed had been planted. Respect. Quiet, uneasy, but real. What none of them knew was that this was only the beginning. The storm that started today was about to reshape everything that came next. The air that morning felt heavy, like something was about to break. The platoon had been ordered into the field for a full-day exercise. Navigation, communication, survival. The kind of drill designed to test every weakness a soldier had. The ground was still soft from last night's storm, boots sinking into mud with every step. Sergeant Miller's voice cut through the fog. "Listen up. Today you'll either learn to act like soldiers or prove to me why you don't belong in this army. And Johnson," his eyes locked on Marcus, "try not to embarrass us again." The usual smirks spread across the ranks, but this time Marcus didn't flinch. He just kept his eyes forward. He had stopped hoping for approval. All that mattered was surviving the day. The squad split into fire teams and moved out. Their mission, navigate through dense woods, set up a comms point, and relay coordinates back to base. On paper, simple. In practice, nothing about it was simple. The radios were temperamental, soaked by the rain, the cold biting at every joint. Johnson's team dragged themselves across uneven terrain, packs heavy, weapons strapped tight. Parker, the same recruit Marcus had hauled from the rope climb, now carried himself quieter than before. He kept glancing at Marcus, almost guilty, but said nothing. Halfway through, the first problem hit. Their radio sputtered, static tearing through the signal. Corporal Davis smacked the side of it. "Dead," he muttered. The team froze. No radio meant no comms. No comms meant failure. And failure meant Miller would eat them alive. The recruits started panicking, voices rising. "What do we do?" "We're screwed." One even muttered, "Figures, Johnson's team." The words stung, but Marcus barely heard them. He crouched beside the set, hands working instinctively. His father had taught him tricks with busted gear back when all they had was a broken CB radio on the farm. He remembered every word. Strip the wire, twist it tight, ground it against metal. He worked fast, ignoring the mud soaking through his knees. "Give me a minute," he said. "Like you know what you're doing," one recruit snapped. Marcus didn't answer. He just kept working. A spark, a hiss, then the static softened. A faint voice came through. "When copy coordinates?" The recruits stared. Davis leaned in. "Holy hell, it works." For the first time, nobody laughed. Nobody mocked. The silence felt heavier than the fog. They pushed forward, confidence shaky but real. Hours later, exhaustion set in. They reached a ravine slick with rain, a rope bridge swaying above it. One by one, recruits crossed, packs dragging at their shoulders. Parker stepped onto the rope, hands trembling. Halfway across, his boot slipped, rope jerking. He lost his balance, arms flailing. A scream tore out of his throat as he tumbled over the edge, dangling by his harness. "Help!" he cried, legs kicking, body slamming against the cliff wall. Panic erupted. Recruits shouted. Some froze. One even looked away. Nobody moved. Nobody except Marcus. His body reacted before his mind caught up. "Hold on!" he shouted, tearing the rope from his pack. He anchored it against a tree, looped it around his chest, and descended. The drop was brutal. The cliff face slick, jagged rocks scraping his arms. His muscles screamed, but he kept going. "I got you!" he yelled down, reaching Parker. The kid's face was pale. Terror etched in his eyes. "Don't let go!" Marcus locked his arm around Parker's chest, pressed his boots against the cliff, and started the climb. Every inch was a battle, rope cutting into his shoulders, weight doubling with Parker pulling him down. His lungs burned, arms shook, but he didn't stop. Step, breath, pull, higher, higher. Until finally they reached the edge. Davis and another recruit grabbed Parker's arms, hauling him up. Marcus collapsed onto the mud, chest heaving, vision blurred. He had nothing left, but he had done it. Parker lay on the ground, gasping, staring at Marcus like he wasn't real. "You saved me. Again." The silence was absolute. Recruits who once mocked him now stared in disbelief. Even Miller, standing at the far side, didn't speak. His jaw tightened, fists clenched, but his eyes betrayed something no one had ever seen from him. Shock. He stepped forward, boots heavy in the mud. "Who authorized that move, Johnson?" His voice tried to carry the same bite, but it cracked under the weight of the moment. Marcus sat up slowly, wiping mud from his face. "Nobody, Sergeant. He was gonna fall." His voice was raw but steady. Miller's stare held on him, long and sharp. For once, no insult followed. Ramirez stepped forward from the back, calm, deliberate. "He just saved a soldier's life, Sergeant," she said quietly. Her words cut through the air like steel. Miller's lips pressed tight, but he said nothing. Not a word. The recruits shifted. The entire dynamic changed in one breath. Johnson, the farm boy, the joke, the outsider, had done what none of them dared to do. He had risked everything and won. That night back at base, the aftershocks rippled through the barracks. Whispers filled the air, but they were different now. Not laughter, not mockery. Whispers of respect, disbelief, even envy. Parker sat on his bunk, staring at the floor. When Marcus walked by, Parker stood abruptly. "Johnson," he said, voice low but clear. "I owe you. Twice." Marcus just nodded. "Forget it." But Parker didn't. He couldn't. The debt weighed heavier than any insult ever had. Later, Miller sat in his office, staring at Johnson's file. He flipped through the pages, eyes narrowing. Then he stopped, frozen. His father's name was there. Sergeant First Class Daniel Johnson, KIA in Afghanistan. Commendations for valor, Bronze Star. A man who had saved his unit in an ambush by running back into fire to drag out the wounded. A man the Army still whispered about. Miller leaned back in his chair, face pale. He had mocked the son of a soldier who had given his life for his men. He had called him weak, worthless, and the kid had proven otherwise in the most brutal, undeniable way. For the first time, Miller felt something he had never felt toward Private Johnson. Shame. Meanwhile, Marcus lay in his bunk, arms still aching, body trembling from exhaustion. He stared at the ceiling, listening to the silence. No jokes, no taunts, just quiet. Ramirez passed by, pausing at his rack. She didn't speak, didn't linger. She just gave the smallest nod, the kind only soldiers understand. Respect, recognition, the kind that couldn't be faked. Marcus nodded back, just once, then closed his eyes. That was the night everything changed. The night Marcus Johnson stopped being the platoon's joke and became something else. The night a kid with cracked boots and nothing but stubborn grit turned the tide, not with words, not with rank, but with action. The kind of action that silences every critic in the room. And what none of them knew yet, what even Marcus didn't know, was that this was only the beginning. The world had just seen a glimpse of who he really was, and it would never look at him the same way again. The days after the ravine rescue felt different. The barracks, once alive with constant jokes at Marcus Johnson's expense, had fallen into an uneasy quiet. Soldiers who once mocked him now avoided eye contact, Or worse, stared too long, as if trying to figure out what they'd missed. The air was thick with unspoken regret. Marcus felt it every time he walked into the chow hall. Trays clattered, voices hushed. He carried his food, sat alone, but this time no one laughed at his portions. They watched instead, like the act of eating in silence had become something worth studying. Parker, the one he had saved twice, couldn't sit still. He shifted in his seat, eyes flicking toward Marcus every few minutes. One morning, he finally stood, tray in hand, and crossed the room. The hall went quiet. "Johnson," Parker said, voice low, carrying the weight of the entire platoon. I was wrong." He set his bread roll on Marcus's tray, the same way Davis once had. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then slowly, Parker walked away, shoulders slumped. That single gesture cracked the wall. Respect had replaced ridicule, but it was a respect no one knew how to show properly. It was awkward, heavy, real. Sergeant Miller, however, was a different story. His pride fought him every step. During formation, he still barked, still hunted for flaws. But his voice didn't land the same way it used to. When he shouted, "Eyes forward, Johnson!" there was no laughter backing him up, just silence. The platoon wasn't with him anymore, and that silence cut deeper than any words. One night, Miller lingered, after lights out, clipboard in hand, pretending to check bunks. But his eyes weren't on the beds. They were on Marcus, who sat quietly polishing his rifle. The sergeant's jaw tightened. For weeks he had called him weak, worthless, a mistake. And now he couldn't look at him without seeing the son of a hero who had bled out on foreign soil to save his men. That truth ate at him like acid. He hated it, hated himself for not knowing, hated Marcus for forcing him to face it without ever saying a word. The breaking point came during inspection. The platoon lined up, boots gleaming, rifles angled just right. Miller walked down the row barking, pointing out imaginary flaws just to remind them who held authority. Then he stopped in front of Marcus. He stared at the cracked boots, at the uniform that was clean but never crisp enough, at the steady eyes that never flinched. His voice dropped, softer than usual. "Private Johnson, step forward." The platoon tensed. Johnson stepped out, boots hitting the floor in perfect rhythm. Miller held his stare for a long time. The silence stretched. Everyone waited for the insult, the jab, the inevitable humiliation. Instead, Miller's face shifted. His jaw clenched, his eyes hard. And then, in front of the entire platoon, he gave a single sharp nod. Just that. A gesture that meant more than any words he could have spoken. The room seemed to exhale all at once. Even Johnson felt it, heavy in his chest. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was respect, raw and reluctant. After dismissal, the platoon lingered. Davis clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Guess the sergeant finally sees it," he muttered. Others nodded silently, some ashamed, some relieved. For the first time, Johnson wasn't walking alone. The moment of truth came later that week in the command tent. Lieutenant Ramirez called Marcus inside. The air smelled of canvas and coffee, maps spread across the table. She didn't waste words. She held out a small ribbon, the kind awarded for actions above expectation during training. "You kept your head, twice. You put your life on the line for another soldier. That matters." She pinned it quietly to his chest, the metal cold against his skin. Marcus stood straighter, swallowing hard. For months he had carried weight, humiliation, doubt. Now for the first time the army itself had recognized him. He left the tent into the cool night air. The stars stretched wide overhead, silent witnesses to everything that had happened. The barracks buzzed faintly in the distance. He walked slowly, ribbon glinting faintly in the moonlight, knowing things would never be the same. Inside, Parker sat waiting at his bunk. When Marcus passed, Parker spoke, not loudly but loud enough. "You're the reason I'm still here. You'll never hear me say another word against you." His voice cracked, honest, stripped of pride. Marcus nodded once, no smile, no gloating, just the same quiet strength that had carried him this far. And for the first time since stepping onto that base, he felt the tide had turned. The insults, the ridicule, the long nights of being the target, They hadn't broken him. They had forged him. But the journey wasn't finished. Everyone sensed it. The silence in the barracks, the glances during chow, the weight of Miller's stare. They were just the beginning. Something bigger was waiting. Something that would test not just Marcus Johnson, but everyone around him. And when it came, no one doubted anymore. He wouldn't be the one to fall. The last week of training felt different, like the whole base was holding its breath. Every recruit knew graduation was close, but it wasn't the ceremonies anyone cared about. It was who you had become in the eyes of your unit. And for Marcus Johnson, the kid with cracked boots and quiet eyes, the shift was undeniable. He felt it in the way men stepped aside when he walked through the chow hall. He heard it in the silence where laughter used to be. But respect in the Army doesn't come with speeches. It comes with moments. And his moment was about to arrive. It happened during morning formation. The air was crisp, breath clouding in front of every face as the platoon stood in perfect rows. Sergeant Miller barked orders like always, voice cutting through the cold. But today was different. Today he stopped in front of Marcus. For a long time, he said nothing, just stared. The platoon stiffened, waiting for the jab, the insult, the reminder of who had power. Instead, Miller did something no one expected. Slowly, sharply, he raised his hand and saluted. The sound of his arm snapping into place echoed louder than a gunshot. The entire line froze. No one breathed. A drill sergeant saluting a private? It was unheard of, a break in the unwritten order of things. But Miller didn't lower his hand. His face was hard, but his eyes carried something heavier. Respect. Reluctant, maybe, but real. Marcus, stunned, returned the salute, his own hand trembling slightly as it rose. The moment stretched long, an entire history of humiliation and struggle flipped on its head in silence. And when Miller finally dropped his arm, the platoon erupted, not with noise, but with a wave of stillness that meant more. Every recruit stood straighter. The balance had shifted forever. Later that night, back in the barracks, the air felt lighter. Soldiers moved quieter, more thoughtful. Parker, sitting on his bunk, broke the silence. "Johnson," he said, his voice steady this time, "if you hadn't been there, I wouldn't be here." The words hung heavy in the room. Marcus looked at him, nodded once, and replied, "We're all here for each other. That's the only way it works. Simple, direct, true." For the first time, nobody rolled their eyes. Nobody snickered. They all just listened. When lights went out, Marcus lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He reached under his pillow, pulled out the worn photo of his father, and held it in the faint glow of the exit light. "I made it, Dad," he whispered. "I didn't break." His throat tightened, but there was no weakness in it. Just pride. A quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The next morning, as the flag rose over the base, Marcus stood in formation with his platoon. The ribbon pinned to his chest caught the early sunlight, glinting faintly. He didn't smile, didn't boast. He just stood steady, shoulders square, part of something larger than himself. And in that silence, surrounded by men who once doubted him, Marcus Johnson knew the truth. Honor isn't handed down. It's earned through sacrifice, through resilience, through refusing to bend when the world pushes hardest. And from that day forward, nobody in that unit ever looked at him the same way again. The flag rippled high above the base, the morning wind cutting sharp across the formation. Marcus Johnson stood steady in his row, shoulders square, boots planted firm in the dirt. Around him, the platoon was silent, eyes forward, every man knowing something had shifted forever. And then, from the corner of his vision, Marcus caught it, Sergeant Miller's eyes fixed on him, not with disdain this time, but with something heavier. The sergeant gave the smallest nod, just once. No words, no ceremony, just respect. In that moment, beneath the rising colors of the nation, Marcus didn't need applause or speeches. The salute had been given. The nod had been earned. The silence said it all. That image should stay with us. The boy mocked for his cracked boots. The recruit dismissed as weak, now standing tall with dignity no one could take away. Because that's the truth of military life. You're tested, broken down, pushed past your limits. Sometimes the world looks at you and sees less, But what matters is how you stand when the weight bears down. What matters is whether you choose silence or strength, bitterness or brotherhood. Marcus chose sacrifice, and in the end, he found honor. There's a saying we all know, actions speak louder than words. Marcus proved it. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He endured. And by enduring, he earned the one thing no rank can give, a place of respect. The Army teaches us that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but more than that, it teaches us that we rise or fall together. Brotherhood, loyalty, honor, that's what lasts. If this story spoke to you, share your thoughts below. Let us hear your voice. Hit the like button if you felt the weight of this journey, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story of resilience and redemption. Until then, stand tall, stay strong, and remember, you're never alone in this fight.